watch the recording, or who knows. But all right, so yeah, let's dive in. Welcome to our live stake webinar. Rob and I have been doing this every winter for a couple years now. We love live staking, and it is a really excellent way to get more native biomass on a variety of sites. A lot of good applications. So thanks for joining us. If somehow you have ended up here without trying to be, welcome, and hopefully you enjoy learning about live stakes too. So yeah, I am Ryan Davis. My colleague Rob Frank will be presenting here too. We're both based out of our Lancaster, PA office of the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and I'll get in a little bit of kind of who we are here before we get into the the real topic of the day. Just so you know who we are, what we do for context, and then also maybe we can work with you if we haven't already. We've been around since 1971 as an organization. Rob and I have not been around since 1971, but the organization has been. So we have 4 offices around the watershed. We're based out of our Lancaster, PA office. Our headquarters is in Annapolis, Maryland. We've got a DC office and a Richmond, Virginia office. No matter where we are working, we have 4 pillars of our work. So that's agriculture, where we're working to reduce non-point source pollution off of our many farms in the watershed. Forest, where Rob and I work. We'll get into a little bit more of what we do here. Green infrastructure, which is all about reducing stormwater impacts in the urban environment and pushing things as far as we can towards using living native materials to help do that. And then stewardship and engagement, which is kind of the glue, keeping the communities together, trying to really boost partnerships so that this movement can move on and on and on for a very long time. We, as an organization, of course, cherish the Chesapeake Bay itself. It's awesome. Huge, cool estuary, the biggest estuary in the United States, 3rd biggest estuary in the world. We love that. We're ecologists. But vast majority of the work of the organization and all of the work, of course, in Pennsylvania is focused not on the bay itself, but up in the watershed. When we work in the watershed, we can improve the Chesapeake Bay itself, but also our local streams, our local communities, our local farms too. So that's how we prefer to work. Quick note on what we do in the forest program. So we have 3 simple objectives. We want to increase the quality of forest cover in our watershed, and also increase the stewardship for that forest cover amongst the residents. There's about 19 million residents of the Bay watershed at this point, which we actually have a similar density of the state of California, actually, which is, I thought, pretty interesting. And somewhat analogous, we have a lot of really open rural areas with not a lot of people, and then we have a lot of super dense urban areas with a lot of people, just like California. And so, yeah, keeping people connected to this work, no matter where they are and what their background is mission critical. We want people to understand and value and appreciate trees, or else we can't expect them to, want there to be trees around. I like to say that our work is very easy at the Alliance. A lot of our colleagues have a much harder job. For over 100 years of science, study after study after study has shown that if you want a healthy watershed, one of the best ways to do that is just to increase forest cover. The more forest cover you have in a watershed, the healthier the water will be. So that's what Rob and I do. We just create forests, make sure they get established, make sure they're as healthy, productive, biodiverse as we could possibly make them, and then on to the next farm to plant more trees. And then we know that eventually the water quality will come. I always put these in because I would have forgotten and I would have dove right in to the subject matter. You may have heard about this through our various newsletters, those sort of things, but if you didn't and you aren't signed up, I do recommend them. I'm not a huge newsletter guy myself, so if I'm recommending you sign up for these newsletters, that means they're good. The Confluence is the Alliance-wide one that's more focused on the Bay, on the watershed, on the work that we're doing, the other work that's going on there, volunteer opportunities, job opportunities, all that kind of stuff. And then the Forest for the Bay newsletter down at the bottom of our newsletter page on the website is more focused on forests, not just the Chesapeake Bay, but just forests generally. So depending on what you're most interested in, there's some good newsletter opportunities for you, again, to fuel your lunch breaks in a fun and productive manner. And then the one final thing I think that I wanted to mention before we start actually talking about live staking is if you want to follow along with us and continue to learn more on your own, we've got a pretty robust YouTube channel, Forests for the Bay. And the Alliance also has a YouTube channel that they're adding more and more there every month too. So we have two big kind of series right now, one on wildlife habitat called Habitats, where we chat about habitat. That's Jim, the host of that catchphrase. And then Tree Talk, which is one that I do where it's all about tree identification and natural history. And we always have ideas for more shows, but we never really get around to making them. So maybe someday you'll see some of our fun ideas coming up there too. So yeah, go ahead and check that out if you aren't sick of us already. Okay, let's get into it. You are not here to hear about us. You're here to hear about live staking. So live staking is basically a way to propagate by cutting. But instead of doing that in a more traditional sense, where you're taking a cutting of, say, the apple tree in your grandma's yard, and you want to root that out and you want to have the same tree, in your yard, you would take it, you would put it in a rooting powder, you would keep it in water, you would pot it up, then you would plant that potted tree where you want it. Live staking is you take the cutting and you install it where you want it. That cutting itself, and that cutting itself develops into the tree or shrub that you are looking to establish. We are referring to woody species here for the whole day. There are certainly herbaceous species that have some of these features, but what we're really talking about is woody perennial growth establishment. And there's a couple species, and we'll be getting into the big heavy hitters a little bit later. But you can see there, that is my former car, my hatchback coupe that I fit hundreds of stakes in. So we're going to talk about the utility of this, but it is a free way to get a lot of material that we can put into our sites that we're reforesting, and oftentimes in areas that it's hard for us to reforest in other ways, like our conventional, planting and sheltering, that sort of thing. Little graphic here from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. We got a bunch of graphics from them. They have some excellent guides online. And Rob is going to get into the nuts and bolts of exactly what we're trying to do. But you can see there, you take these sticks that we cut of specific species, you squish it into the mud, and you set up your grid, and you should have pretty good odds of that tree or shrub establishing. That is the kind of classic, live staking. But once you start this method, there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. These species have this adaptation to be able to respond to being partially buried by rooting and then growing new above ground growth. We're going to spend several minutes talking about kind of how this works, the sort of biochemistry essentially behind what's going on here. Not because we are huge biochemistry guys, but because by understanding kind of exactly what's happening, how this works, you can figure out how to apply, how to basically use this phenomenon that these species have for whatever your project is. For example, you can, instead of taking that stake, burying most of it in the ground, and then having one, individual from there, you can take a longer cutting and create a mat out of a bunch of different cuttings, create brush layers, make sure that these have good contact with the soil, and then you're going to get more lateral growth rather than just one individual. And then another example of that is what is called a fascine, where you're bundling together a bunch. So that is great for, let's say, the toe of a slope that's having erosion problems, or say a stream bank that needs a lot of cover, that sort of thing. In addition to all these awesome guides, I found this cool picture from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. This is an elementary school that they just did this on a field trip. So if fourth graders can do it, so can you. Developing these things, it's super easy, and they work way better than you think they're going to work. Actually, if live stakes work better than planting potted stuff often. So one of the reasons why we want to talk to you all about it today. One other thing on that, of kind of the other things to do, you're going to have a lot of scrap pieces. And just, to throw it out there, you don't have to just leave those behind on the site or throw them away. If you are in a business, you might be able to actually sell these for more, floral decorations. Or maybe that could be an incentive for people to want you to plant them on their property. Someday they will be able to sell floral decorations. That in the middle there is my lovely wife, my long-suffering wife. making wreaths out of my excess live stake trimming. So before we had a kid, that's what we used to do on the weekends. And now we just chase him around. But and then there on the right, red osier dogwood. It's a really beautiful plant, which everybody kind of knows, but looks great in a vase. And I like to put water in the vase, and then a lot of them actually will leaf out, and then I pot some of them up too. So all right. So what's going on here? Let's get into that biochemistry. Not that I'm a biochemical expert, but I am a plant ecology expert. So these species are all adapted to wet environments. If you are a plant, obviously you cannot move. So if you want to survive for more than just a couple years, you're going to have to develop adaptations to surviving disturbance in your environment. We know that a lot of trees are tolerant to fire because fire used to be very common on the landscape. That was a primary disturbance force impacting upland forests. In lowland forests, bottomland forests, wetlands, riparian forests, floodplain forests, there are other disturbance factors. Fire a little bit, but really what we're looking at is flooding, things related to flooding, like ice scour, debris coming through an area, and then also beavers, which are doing a lot of ecosystem engineering out there. At one point in time, there's an estimated 500 million beavers living in North America, which is about as many humans currently live in the US and in Canada. So there were beavers basically on every single stream, impacting these systems. And so these trees that evolved in these wet areas evolved to be able to handle this constant disturbance. And those big ways that they've been able to adapt to those environments is being able to stump sprout after they get either mowed over by a beaver or by a big mat of debris coming through after a flood or something like that. And by sending out root tissue in adventitious tissue, meaning not roots growing from non-root tissue. So you can see here, this is an elderberry, much like our office elderberry, growing new roots out of places that off of stem tissue. So that was one that on a site that had some flood damage. It was in a shelter. The whole shelter tipped over and the elderberry was laying flat on the ground. And it was only a couple weeks after that flood that I checked on the site, and it had already started to grow new roots out of where the stem tissue was touching the soil. So what an excellent adaptation to be able to survive in these wet conditions. If this shrub did not have that adaptation, it would have just laid there on its side and eventually would have, succumbed. Whereas it was able to re-root itself back in after falling over. Or in other words, less scientific terms, they take a licking and they keep on ticking. Some of them literally take a licking from beavers. So zooming in a little bit on that beaver damage, I love it. I love when beavers come into our site. So this site was one that we planted this in fall of 2018. So at this point, taking these pictures here, boy, you can do the math. I think that this is the fourth growing season, or it had 4 growing seasons underneath it. So these trees are actually pretty much established. The site is looking great. And then I got a notification from the borough that, oh boy, beavers have moved in. And I went down, and every single tree that the beavers felled were species that stump sprout very readily. So here, as an example, you can see the new tissue growing right out of here. And this is the exact same process biochemically within the tissues that we're going to be using in our live staking to make sure we can spread these species around even further. So what's going on here? The first sort of technical term I'll use is meristem tissue or meristematic tissue. Basically what that is plant stem cell tissue. It's undifferentiated tissue. It's not destined to become a branch or a root or a leaf. It is ready to be mobilized to become whatever the plant needs it to be. Most plants are kind of constantly growing. Even if they're not growing too much taller, they're going to be putting out new leaves, they're going to be putting out new stems. When they stop doing that, they have started the process of death, of senescence. So everything is going to be kind of constantly growing until it maxes out and dies essentially of old age for a plant. So everything has this meristem tissue in it. Most of that meristem tissue is concentrated in a few places in the above ground component. And then there's obviously root meristem tissue below ground because the roots are constantly growing too. On twigs, we have three big areas that are going to come into play as far as live staking goes. Apical meristem is the terminal bud, so the bud at the very tip of a stem. So those tips will just grow permanently. They're kind of growing out of the tip, making the twig longer. Then we have intercalary meristems, which are basically the buds on those lateral branches, becoming those new shoots that are going to grow into new stems. And then within the diameter of each twig, we have what's called the lateral meristem. So that's responsible not for creating, new, like a lengthened twig, but an increase in diameter, putting on more xylem, which is water transference tissue, phloem, which is sugar transfer tissue, and growing kind of from the inside out. In these areas of stem cell tissue, of meristem tissue, a plant hormone called auxins are concentrated. These are growth hormones, essentially. So if you get that rooting powder from a hardware store or a garden store or something like that, auxins are a lot of that chemical composition of what is in there. These are plant hormones that inspire growth from the meristem tissue. So what we're doing when we're live staking, or honestly, when you are pruning, when you're doing your winter pruning, which that's not what this talk is here about, but boy, we only have a couple more weeks. I have to get out and do my pruning. So just like with live staking, make sure you sanitize your tools before you do. Just some unsolicited advice there. But anyway, pruning is doing the exact same thing actually as live staking. You are redistributing your growth hormones within your tree or shrub to make it do what you want it to do. If you take out, say, the apical meristem by cutting off that terminal bud, what we're doing is we are redistributing the concentration of those auxins just in the intercalary meristems where those lateral buds are. So then if we take that twig, we cut off the terminal bud, we have a couple of those lateral buds, we plant it into the ground at a really a nice depth, about 3/4, 2/3 or so of the stem. Then we have really good odds of those auxins, those stem cell tissues growing out of those lateral buds. And then we have new shoots, new roots, and now, hey, we have a new shrub or tree that gets established. So, this is the why. This is the why all of the instruction that Rob is going to give, the kind of recipe to doing this, but we feel that it's really valuable to kind of understand chemically what's going on here. Because if you don't, then you might, not cut the lateral bud off or something like that. That would probably diminish the odds of your shrub establishing. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it over to Rob to start about the how, starting with species ID and then the recipe for getting this done.
All right. I appreciate the intro, Ryan. Yeah, I'm here to talk to you about the types of species that we're going to be using in live stake. This first slide here shows you the trees. They're more on the shorter side for these first couple, box elder and black willow. I see that he has them approved, and yeah, they do work. Box elder, if you aren't familiar, is a willow species, or excuse me, that's a maple species, but doesn't have a maple-like leaf. And it's kind of I like to call it an opossum type of tree. It grows kind of ugly and does a lot of work for us and is underappreciated. But we love that one. We plant a lot of it. And we are also getting people to grow it for us because you can't get it at greenhouses and things like that. It is just a workhorse native tree, especially here in Lancaster County on the streams here. Right outside our office, we probably have, I don't know, maybe 24 box elders growing out there. And that is our source for a lot of our seeds. Black willow is the other one there listed. And, we have them here as trees. You could climb a black willow, you can climb a box elder. So, it's a tree. And then the ones below there are really sort of your lunker trees, more straight stem guys. American sycamore, river birch, and eastern cottonwood. And yeah, those are species that you definitely will will have heard going into riparian zone, everyone loves a sycamore. Everyone was putting river birches in every plan, and cottonwoods. We don't see them that often, but we know where a couple of them are, and they certainly love the water area. Let's bump it over to the next one. Right before you bump that one, I did want to mention that there are the tree talks for those species. So if you want to look at that channel, there's a lot to learn there. They are entertaining, and you learn a lot about it. So yeah, here's your black willow. I really like the growth pattern on black willows. Chaotic, going all over the place. And they often demonstrate their live staking abilities by falling over and rooting right into the ground. And then they have a characteristic growth after that that kind of reminds me of like what a pipe organ looks like. You have that long branch laying flat on the ground, putting roots in, and then you get these straight branches coming out of it. And man, if you see one of those and you're out live stake harvesting, those are good ones to get because you get them right in the right size. We will get to that later. And yeah, right next to it, there is that box elder to prove I wasn't lying about it being a maple, Acer Negundo. Go out, find that one, look at the Samaras. Those are the seeds, the little whirligigs. They're just falling off the trees right now. But that green stem there, for me, if you can determine that it's already maple, that green stem on the new growth, that's usually for me, that's the, oh, hey, I got a box elder. So two big ones, two of my favorite ones. So bump over. All right. Shrubs. The willow, black willow, the box elder, they are sort of shrubby trees. They're trees, but they're sort of shrubby trees. These are more actual, real, traditional shrubs as people understand them to be. Red osier dogwood, again, he talked about that in the beginning. In the winter, especially, those stems get really red. Same with silky dogwood. Best of luck telling those apart without cutting them apart. But if you're live staking, you will. Sandbar or coyote willow, pussy willow, elderberry, swamp rose. We can find these out in nature here. We have a number of collection sites where we know we'll find these. Pussy willow, that's sort of one that maybe it's in your backyard or grandma's backyard, your mom's backyard. Well, you can take that when they're doing the trimmings and put those in there. My mom always had a vase of them on the kitchen table after she did her pruning. So again, those woody florals. It's also her birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. She's not watching. She wouldn't be able to use Zoom. But yeah, the ones here Ryan has with a little bit less success, your smooth and serrated alder, Arrowwood viburnum, buttonbush, and winterberry. Yeah, the arrowwood and the buttonbush I can also attest to. I did my own little trial on some of our cuttings. I just put them in a bucket. They rooted in water. I put them in my yard. They grow in the yard. My yard is not next to a creek. They will if you water them. So if they're in the water, some of those, buttonbush will just grow in water. They like a real wet foot. So really good ones. We're going to look at some pictures of them later. So I'll cut out my talks here again, so I don't miss it this time. We do have the tree talks note there with the asterisk. And 9-bark. I also haven't tried 9-bark. I would love to find 9-bark. I don't find it too often in the wild. There's a couple places, but I never have permission to cut it when I'm there. High bush blueberry. I think you took some blueberry, right? Yeah. Do you know if it worked?
I did not follow up with Tim, who planted it.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
We gave it to Tim. If you missed it in the intro, Tim is who we named our office elderberry after. And again, that elderberry is growing in a too large soda cup in our office that we just water there. And winterberry, yeah, that's another one of those ones that's going to be valuable for the woody florals. And spice bush. I would love to try spice bush. Should do that. I will make a point to do that. Put that on my list. Go next one here. Yeah, I love this picture because it's definitely an ice storm coated that red twig dogwood. And on your right, you have the elderberry. It has all of the berries on it. I have one in my yard. It gets prolific berries. People like to use this for different things. Depending on your source, sometimes people say that these are toxic. I would err on the side of caution before eating a big old handful of elderberries. I think you're supposed to process them, make sure you're not eating the pits and all that stuff. But if you are a bird person, if you like birds, I like birds, they will come and eat all of these berries off before you have a chance to get them out. I have some very happy catbirds, though they don't sound happy. If you've ever heard a catbird, they definitely sound like they're complaining constantly. But they eat all of my elderberries before I get a chance to get the seeds. And they'll do that with the dogwoods too. But the personal witness, the elderberry, and that'll grow huge, just a huge tree, shrub. Mine's about 12 feet tall right now. I'm going to trim it back and jam it into stream banks. More on that later. We'll bump it. Okay. So we have on your right here that elderberry live stake. You can see how warty that is. That's where you're going to start to see the roots growing out into the soil. Or if you do it like I have done, you start it in a bucket and you forget it, and then it starts to grow roots. And you can still put that in a pot, then you get yourself another elderberry that you can plant later. All right, we'll go to the next slide. And the swamp rose. Swamp rose, you get a nice rose flower out of that. Everyone likes roses. We typically are associating it with your garden roses. Knockout roses are not my favorite thing, but they got very popular. And so if you want a native rose, something that will attract something besides just Japanese beetles and aphids, go with your swamp rose. Give it give your wildlife something a little bit more useful. And then there on the right is that sandbar coyote willow. In this application, which is, I believe, Ryan's yard, it is a hedge there. That is a windscreen. That is a privacy screen. That is a windbreak. And be used as a snow fence. There's lots of ways that you can landscape and still get other values out of it. I like willows because they are host to a number of butterfly species. We didn't put that in here, but if you're a bug person, the butterfly species will go on that. Oh heck, Viceroy and White Admiral like willow species. They also like your shrub dogwoods. And, if you're a bird person, what they eat those caterpillars. So again, letting a little bit of my native species bias come in here, but I'll ask your forgiveness later. Go to the next one here. Buttonbush. Buttonbush is one that really likes a wet foot. I keep using the term wet foot. That means you can basically plant it in water. It's a swampy thing. In the wild, I see them in wetlands. I see them right in a riparian zone. And you're not going to really find anything else that has that flower. That is a beautiful flower. It has a nice fragrance if you stick your nose into it. Just a beautiful shrub with a lot of character. And again, that's going to attract pollinators. On your right, viburnum, similar, you're getting berries out of it, and it does have a nice white flower. I wouldn't smell it. Well, I would, but if you smell it, you're going to notice that it just kind of smells a little bit like rot or carrion, sort of the smell of death. And again, you're bringing in pollinators, maybe not the pollinators that you're used to, but that's a smell that's really just, they love to smell that. your flies and different types of bees and wasps will just go right to that. So give a variety to your ecosystem and you will get a variety of species in return. So if you're looking to plant that one, another one you get for free, and that does grow really well in the riparian area. Next. And there's winterberry, and this is showing you what winterberry is known for. If you get the eye for winterberry, if you know what it looks like, you'll start to drive around and see this planted in different areas. This can be, it often is just used as a landscape plant. I've seen all of these ones in landscape. Oftentimes, I don't think that people know that they are native plants, but you know, I'm happy for them. Winterberry is going to hold on that red color there. Lots of berries. Birds eat those. It's also a great cover there. And again, you can plant these in density in a wet area if you have a low area in your property, and they will grow in there and cover a lot of ground. And that you can still see that red. So if you're ever looking at a landscape catalog and they're talking about their species, one thing that's often thrown in there, and it's marketing, and I'll allow it, is winter interest. And that basically means when it loses all of its leaves and loses all of its flower, why do I care if it's there? Well, if you have your silky dogwoods, if you have your red osier dogwoods, if you have your winterberries, you can look at something red in your landscape besides the cardinals that show up when it's snowing. So again, another great species to have out there. Next. And if you don't believe us, this has been scientifically analyzed. It's not just me with a bucket in my backyard that I fill with my rain barrel when I'm pulling weeds. We have actual scientific evidence to back this up. Chesapeake Conservancy's data here. Give it a read if you like the more in-depth scientific reading. You'll get a lot out of it. It's a good study. So it's all true things. We're not just pulling your leg. Go to the next one. All right. Now we're into the good stuff. That's all been good stuff, but this is my favorite part, the applications of live staking. We're increasing vegetation. We are increasing stream bank stabilization and enhancing the riparian buffers. You know, the core of our mission at the Alliance on the Forest Projects team is planting trees and buffering the streams. If you have vegetation in the stream side, you can see in that picture right there, that is mostly just sediment there. And look at that. I never noticed that before. There is a raccoon track in that picture. How fun. So yeah, we have, I believe that's a dogwood. It driven in the ground there. And that is sprouting. On the picture on the right, you can see that the root mass is going out there, but you can still see the cut on the bottom. This is all just to show you, yeah, we're putting out the roots in there. That is locking in the soil. That is holding that in place. That is reducing erosive effects. You know, if you aren't in this sort of field in this industry, and I know a lot of you are, if you're just pouring water over glass, it's just going to rip right by. If you're pouring water over grass, it's going to slow it down. The more things that you put in the way of the water, the more it's going to slow it down. This reduces the erosion. This reduces that non-point source pollution, the sediment going to the water, the stuff that brings the pollution downstream into your creeks, into your bays. We're stabilizing that. Just using vegetation. This is just the natural process that we have disturbed over the last few centuries here. Increasing the vegetation that prevents another pollution type that we don't often think about, and that is thermal pollution. I'm not talking about the stuff that comes out of power plants, but that is also thermal pollution in the water. But this is just the sun hitting the water. If it's shaded, it's going to be cooler. You know, if we were in a room together, I'd say show of hands for the fishermen here. Dissolved oxygen is related to water temperature. If you raise your water temperature, the dissolved oxygen goes down. And the fish need oxygen to breathe. It's a tricky thing about being a vertebrate. You need oxygen to breathe. If we have a higher oxygen content in the water, you're going to be able to support more fish, bigger fish. It's a big deal for trout. The cold water streams, you see those as you're looking, the limestone springs, they're the ones that have the trout. The water's cold, more dissolved oxygen. If we shade it, you're going to get more dissolved oxygen. There's a one-to-one map chart relation between dissolved oxygen and temperature. All right, we'll go on the next one here. All right, this I put this one in here selfishly. This is a project I worked on. This is by a site where there was a dam downstream, so you can see the sediment impoundment behind it. What's a sediment impoundment? That's all the soil that washed off of the farmland upstream and built up behind the dam. If you're familiar with the Conowingo Dam, you know that there's a big pile of sediment behind that and all the other stuff that the sediment brought with it. Probably a lot of cell phones, boat parts, things like that. But that's just builds up behind the dam. It's a trap for all that. So when we take out those dams, then you're left with all that sediment, and that sediment just can't wait to get right back into the water and bring that pollution downstream, make the dead zones in the bay. So let's keep it in place. This is one of those instances where dilution is not the solution to pollution. Let's lock it in place. And in here is a stream bank restoration there. It's a huge, that was like a 15-foot bank there with white pines that were just falling over into the creek. Did some armoring there. That is a mud sill. So logs sunk into the stream to hold the back sediment in place, and also some rock armoring. But that wasn't good enough. We had to put roots into it. So that is a mix of silky red osier, dogwood, black willow, all sorts of willow in there. And yeah, you can see that that's 4 years. And my goodness, that's a whole lot of vegetation that went in that small amount of time. It worked. We did this with volunteers. So it took maybe an hour to do that with Penn State Extension volunteers and some of my own volunteers at the time. And we got that in there. I have to go back and check. It's just up the road. So I'll have to make a detour and take a picture to update the Livestake presentation 2026 when we do that one. All right, next. Oh, how to. All right. This is really complicated. It's not. It's very easy. Cut it about 18 inches in length. For me, that's about my forearm to the tip of my finger. That's how I'd do it. Or you can just use a ruler until you know what 18 inches is. It should stick out of the top of your hardware store bucket. That should do it. If it's a little shorter, you're fine. Just put it in there. Do it about a 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch in diameter. So yeah, I put in there, it's a dime to 2 pennies wide. Just trying to give you an idea, because I don't want to measure when I'm out in the field. I want to cut as many stakes as possible. Because the last time we did this, it was raining. Yeah. And then get back in the truck and eat pizza. And once you do that, you keep them moist. How do you keep them moist? Put them in a bucket with some water in the bottom. That'll keep them going until you need to put them in the ground. We'd like to try to get them in as soon as we can, but if you wait a little bit, you might be okay, as long as you keep it cool and dark. And put a diagonal cut on the part closest to the roots. We're saying it that way because once you put it into your bucket, if you cut it square on the top and square in the bottom, which way is down, it helps to have that diagonal cut. Plus, once you're installing it, that diagonal cut comes in handy. All right, we'll go to the next one here. All right, cool and moist. It's in a bucket. And that's one of our star volunteers, Rob, isn't it? He's carrying away. Shouts out to Rob. I know some of you on this call know him. Feel free to tease him. I think I owe him a text, actually. He wanted to give me an update on the site. Yeah. So it's pretty easy. Even Rob can do it. No, Rob is very capable. But yeah, he's helped us out here. And this is something that anyone can do. You can take a few, you can take a ton. The more you take, if you have a site for it, you can just jam it in there. There's other ways to keep them cool that some of our partner organizations do. Chesapeake Conservancy does have a cooler that they put them in. That helps. Other ways to keep them moist. I've seen newspaper used, wrapped in a plastic bag that keeps them wet, damp, and also I've heard rice hulls used. Rice hulls are something that you can order. All right, we'll go. Yeah, here we are. All right, talked about this earlier. This is right outside our office, and it has changed in appearance since this. There is the dam got, the bridge got worked on. So we did some live staking, and then recently there's some other live stakes that went in by somebody else. I'm going to check on that one. Yeah, the depth here is what you're hoping to do correctly here. 2/3 of the way down into the ground. So you only want to see 1/3 to 1/4 of the stake once you pound it in there. You don't want to pound it in flush. Then it's just buried. You don't want to have it sticking out too much. It won't be structurally in there. 90 degrees to the soil surface, perpendicular to the surface. If you're on a stream bank that has an angle, you got to adjust your angle. It's not like walking on a roof where you adjust yourself to upright. You're going to have it that if the stream bank is like that. And yeah, always the point down. If you point it in the other way, it'll might work, but it's going to definitely work better if you have it point down. Yeah, we'll go to the next one here. So here we have a little bit of an example, driving it right in through the snow. Again, we're doing it at that sort of transition time of year between winter and spring. It's in the dormant period because of what Ryan explained earlier. You want to have it not growing when you put it in there. We want to put it into its new environment, shock it, and have it sort of panic and put out all the new growth to get itself in there. You can see there, we have it on us. It's kind of a little bit of on that upper one on the right, the right-hand picture. I think that one's an alder, and it is in at an angle to match the stream bank. The one in the foreground picture is more sort of 90 degrees straight down. So yeah, they're going to work that way. There are some other practices that I have heard where you take some longer stakes and put them in there. Again, you know, we're putting more of them into the ground because we're trying to get more root mass in there and then have it take up nutrients, take up water, and then it can grow on its own. Oh, one more reason to put them in the ground. Deer will come by and pull these out. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about deer when it comes to my work because they tend to just get in the way by destroying everything. But yeah, they need to eat too, and they'll eat this stuff. You're getting a lot of new tasty growth, and they'll come in and get it. I'm happy to feed the deer, but cut me a break. All right, we'll go to the next one here. All right, so if you didn't understand what I was saying because I speak in a weird way or I'm confusing, you can go to some of our partner organizations. We learned a lot from them. We have Penn State Extension. They have an excellent video series for live staking. I think they got a couple of those how-to guides that are on their website. Definitely look at those. That's a great reference. I've used that many times myself. And then the Chesapeake Conservancy, their collaborative is very involved. They do a lot of work. They have a much more detailed version of what they do, and it's worth looking into. And if you're looking to get some on the ground experience on this one, we have a link there for Manatee Conservancy. They will have an event at the 22nd of March. You can get in there, cut some live steaks. They have a live steak nursery they have access to. They can cut those steaks, and we will get some of those to get into our nursery with our partner at Penn State Extension, to go into other buffers in different places. So be a great way to get some practice on that, and help you with your species ID. In addition to that, if you are, that'll help you if you want to do any of your sort of backyard or DIY live staking. It's a good way to learn about those species. Really quickly, if you are going to harvest live steaks, make sure you have permission from where you're harvesting. Yeah, so check those out. Go to the next one here. Please sign up for the newsletters. And check out some of our events. We are having our spring planting season coming up here. I got a lot of sites around the watershed. Please come out if you've never come to one of our tree plantings. We love to meet new people and teach them about planting trees. If you have planted trees with us, we like you more, and we're happy to see you come out. But yeah, we're really looking forward to planting season. It was a cold winter, so please come out and see us. Come out to Tree Lay. You get a chance to plant trees at night if you want to, and if you don't, well, there's other sites involved. I think I have a daytime site this year. My first one was a sunrise site, and yeah, so come out, get a good taste of it. If you're not in the Pennsylvania area, we got other events with Tree Lay this year in our other state offices. So please check out Tree Lay, see what there is to do, and we'll see you at those events. Oh my, yeah. 2020, huh? 2021? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Then yeah, that's a big truck just filled with live steaks. We filled that truck many times with live steaks. I'm Rob, he's Ryan. Check us out on social media, and we're here for your questions now.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Rob. I guess let's start with there were a bunch in the chat, and then we can open it up if anybody has any in person. So first question, interesting question on Bradford pear and why were they propagated and planted. I think the short answer is people just did not think about ecology. If you think about it, is a pretty new science, and people just didn't really think about the negative ramifications of their actions until somewhat recently, as far as like the environment goes. So brand new stuff to do that science created was popular at one point in time, and now we have a degree of skepticism because we've learned our lessons. So also I think people were told that Bradford pear was sterile before it got planted, and it turns out it was not sterile enough. So but on highbush blueberry, deer do like to browse on highbush blueberry. Like Rob mentioned, they will nip on all this stuff, but that's part of the kind of density. So it's recommended to plant them if you're going to be planting individual stakes and you want to create a really thick area like what Rob showed on that one success story picture. 2x2 or 2x3 or so in a grid is the way to go. So basically the idea is we plant so many that it kind of swamps and the deer can't eat every single one. And these, once they get established, they can tolerate that browse pretty well because of the, all these factors that make them good for live staking. Rachel Wentz asked about elderberry, success growing them after staking. Elderberry is a champion. However, they have their growth habit. They have a lot of dead tissue. And so they break easily, and that might have been some of what has impacted. They're just kind of hard to install, but they're kind of champions once they do. They do really like wet areas, but I would say less. They're not kind of a saturated habitat sort of species. So if you get them in ground that is pretty wet, they'll usually do pretty well if you can avoid kind of snapping them, breaking them. Another thing that I don't know if Rob mentioned, but we will sometimes make like a pilot hole, kind of smaller in diameter than what the stake itself is, and that'll help us kind of get good soil contact and get it installed without breaking the stake. Continuing to move down. I have heard that black chokeberry will, and so in that study that Rob talked about from Chesapeake Conservancy, I would check that out because they have stats, from their studies, and black chokeberry might have been mentioned in there, but we don't typically live stake it. Let's see. Okay, and that's it. So, anyone have any questions or I guess verbally? And if not, no worries.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on the the elderberry question, the one that I have that's doing so well is planted by a downspout, and so it gets water, and the other ones that were staked are sort of downslope from that. If I am trying to get them established in a less wet area, so it's something that's not purely riparian or in a wetland area, I do water it, but that is in my own yard. So that's landscape live staking versus a conservation live staking, where it is more about numbers and density and putting them in there. All right.
And
New
on
question
that,
came in. Yeah.
oh, so I'll on that note, the part of why we want to install a lot of the length into the ground is because the more contact you get with groundwater, the better your success is going to be. You're installing these, they don't have any root tissue, but they do need water. So they're only absorbing things through osmosis until they start to develop those roots. So wet soil is where this is going to work the best. We have seen this work in pretty dry soil, but where you get the kind of numbers that you're probably going to be looking for to make this worth your time, wetter is better. So usually the first, you know, 10 feet or so back from a creek, and then, wetter wetland areas too. Sorry, go ahead, Rob. The next question.
Sure. So the sticks in the bucket stay good without being planted. Um, Again, we try to get them out pretty quick. I think we've kept them for a few weeks, up to like a month, and then they start to sprout roots. And once they start putting roots out, drive them in the ground is going to strip the roots right out. So that's wasting a lot of their stored energy. So get them in the ground before they root. If they do start to root, you could probably, dibble them in there. So just sort of wedge them, put a hole in there and close it up. That might be your way to go. And again, as a backyard experiment, not a scientific white paper, I have grown them in a bucket till they root and then put them into a pot and cover it with soil and then kept it wet and just grown a shrub from that. So if you let them sit too long, then you can just turn it into a potted plant that you can then then you'd have to dig a hole and plant it. So that's how that's what I would say. So to directly answer your question, what I do to keep them alive, they're dormant. So you keep them moist and dark and cold. If they start to put out roots, definitely keep them watered and then transfer them to soil. But if they don't have roots, get them in as quickly as possible. And depending on the weather, you can go out to a month, but again, sooner the better. Sooner the better. Oh, any conifers that live stake? I haven't tried. I don't think so. You're mute, Ryan.
Sorry, speaking of 2020, I lost 5 years of experience on Zoom here and forgot to unmute. I believe hemlock will do something called layering, where if a branch is on the ground, it will reroot into the ground. So they might live stake, but as you probably know, they, are essentially on the way out. They are moving towards functional extinction due to invasive pests. Insects. So hemlock maybe. I have never seen bald cypress on a list or tried it myself. You would think, and I wonder if what you're referring to is their good survival in wet and then their knees, they do have these other tissues. Hey, worth a try. Email us if it works. Definitely worth a shot. A lot of species, I mentioned the rooting powder very early. Most species you could propagate doing that way. So you could take a cutting of something, put it in a glass of water with rooting powder. It'll start to root out, and then you could pot it up. And that white paper again goes into a little bit of detail on that. If rooting powder helped some of the species that you can live stake to establish, and the answer is most of them have enough of this root hormone in them. Like willows are mostly root hormone, So, but yeah, Joel, I would love to hear if you try it out and it works, or if you try it out and it fails, let us know. I promise I eventually respond to all emails, but it might take a lot longer than you are hoping. Okay. Last call. Any other questions? And I think it is 1 o'clock. So go ahead, Raj.
Oh, thank you for answering all my questions, by the way. I wanted to ask you, is there anything you can do to prevent any parasites from getting those steaks before they even get a chance to sprout?
Yeah, good. I think that is another reason why they don't recommend that they stay in the bucket for too long. We definitely don't want fungal infections. We want to try to keep as much of the microbiome intact on the steaks as possible. Um, I like to just do visual inspections. You can sometimes a shrub that you want to harvest from doesn't look very healthy. They'll maybe have scale on it. They'll have insect infections. They'll clearly have some sort of rot, fungus. So I skip those. And then again, I really recommend sanitizing your pruners. What I like to do is just have a Ziploc baggie with like rags in it and isopropyl alcohol, and I'll just clean the pruners off as frequently as I can take the time to do so. But Rob, do you have any additional? I should have let you field that one. Rob used to do pest control on trees in former job.
I did, yeah. I was an arborist. Yeah, the pests that you're going to see in the dormant season would be scale, if you have the eye for it. It's sort of like white little flaky things. That'll be on the shrub dogwoods. That is something that can be on there. Other things would be in an egg stage. So are you going to transport some of the pests? It's not impossible, but do your best to look for that. I did take a note to maybe add that to 2026's demonstration if I can speed up my speaking rate. But yeah, those are things to look for. And Ryan mentioned isopropyl alcohol, same thing. At CVS or other pharmacies, you can get ones that just come in a sprayer. So you can spray it on there. I also like a rag, but because I like to wipe it. It removes the physical stuff that's on there. Wash your hands. Don't just use the hand sanitizer. Anyway, health tips. Anybody have any other questions while we still got you? This is a good one. Okay.
Cool.
Shoot us an email. Check out the links. Check out the partner events. Check out Manada's live stake harvest if you can get out there. And we hope to see you at a volunteer event this year. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. And try yourself. Very little barrier to entry. And it's pretty amazing. And we have found that a lot of people get really excited about it. So once you figure out how to do it well, we implore you to share the word and get people excited about trees. All right, we're gonna shut this down, but yeah, appreciate it, everybody. And have a good end of your winters. Take care.
Bye.